Benedict.
Hello there, very good evening. Welcome to another edition of Face to Face. With each passing day this year, we draw closer and closer to a very decisive election here in Sri Lanka, an election that people have been wanting for since the beginning of the Aragalaya, and an election that the people can hopefully bring about some real change in the political system here in Sri Lanka. To discuss these matters and much more, we've got with us today Dr. Harini Amarasuriya, no stranger to the show, parliamentarian from the National People's Power Movement. Very good evening, Dr. Amarasuriya, and welcome to the show.
Good evening, Charlotte. Thank you.
So, Doctor, speaking about this growing conversation regarding Sri Lanka's policy and the general public really being awakened to the realities that be in the country and really becoming part of this political debate. Now, the most recent or the most significant event to take place recently was the May Day rallies. Now, of course, although in this part of the world, the May Day rally is used as a political statement, it's always the political parties who organize the rallies, although in reality, it's supposed to be a day for the working class of Sri Lanka. But for one reason or the other, in Sri Lanka, it's the political parties that really lead the charge, and more often than not, the May Day is used as a statement of political power to show the general public of Sri Lanka how strong a political party is to have as many participants as possible for their May Day rallies. So, Dr. Harini, how did your May Day rally go?
Went very well. We're very pleased. We had 4, as you know. We had 3 rallies in Colombo, Matara and Anuradhapura, and 1 in Jaffna. And we were very happy with the outcome. We had very good attendance. And as you know, this was the first time we did a May Day rally as NPP. So that was also a significant milestone for us, and we were really pleased because we were able to show that we have grown, we have expanded, we have new members, new people joining us, but also that element of organizing and discipline that you generally see with the JVP May Day rallies was also evident in the NPP rally. So that culture of making sure that it's a safe space for everyone, that no one feels uncomfortable, that women and children can participate happily, that you clean up afterwards, that the processions are organized and orderly. All of that we were able to ensure this time as well, despite much larger numbers than before. So for us, that was a real reason to be happy, because not only did we bring numbers, but I think we were also able to really mark that day with a group of people who were very focused on why they were there. Right? I mean, it wasn't just another political rally. It meant something to everyone who was there. And that was, I think, what was really special for us, that we were able to pull that off.
Just for sake of clarity now, usually, and I've seen this with my own eyes, when we speak about the May Day rallies, usually the understanding is that, I come for your May Day rally, I get buck packet and a quarter of a bottle. There have been instances where even Newsfirst cameras have caught this, and we've of course reported it to the general public in the previous years, of course. But keeping all of those aside, this time around, did you see anything like that happening at NPP rallies?
No, that's not our culture. As you know, that we are a collective movement. We are a movement based very much on organizing people, right? So whatever event we do, there's a lot of work that happens in the background. Collecting people. So as you know, over the past 2-3 years, we've done a lot of work at the grassroots level in setting up our NPP grassroots level structure. So preparations for the May Day rally, why we have it, how we have it, organizing transport, organizing food, happens locally, right? So there's no patron distributing largesse or saying, here's the bus, here's the food, here's the arak, now come, right? So it's a voluntary collective movement, right? So the party will give the political leadership, but unless there is support and that collective energy, this can't happen, right? So right from whether it's organizing their transport, how you organize the food, it's done collectively. There's a coordinator for each Grama Seva Niladari, there's a committee, they will do that. Then each bus will have someone who is responsible for that bus, right? So it's centrally organized at one level in that, you know, the whole sort of setup is centrally organized, but each local organization is responsible, or local unit is responsible for the well-being and the protection and the collection of people who come there.
Well, moving on, Dr. Harini, now you said that the NPP is very good and of course, as much as organizing the people goes, it's important that since your party is now vying for power at the presidential election, organizing things, organizing policies, organizing plans in order to bring Sri Lanka out of this economic crisis that we're in. And I'd like to question you about a few things that I believe the general public would like some clarity on. Because speaking of the policies of the NPP, especially with regard to education, and I believe there wouldn't be a better person to speak about the education policy of the NPP besides you, Dr. Harini. So I'm very glad to have you on the show today. Recently, there was this decision that was taken, and the program began really to provide medical degrees from the Kotalavala Defence University for a price, of course. Now, previously, this was attempted to be done by SITEM. There was, of course, controversy there with, initially President Mahinda Rajapaksa himself being a staunch supporter of this, and then once they lost the election and came into the opposition, the same group that once supported this came out on the street and protested against it. At the end of the day, what happened was it was a failure. The students at SITEM were absorbed into the state structure because they've already paid their fees, they've already begun their academics, and it would be unfair to just leave them in the lurch. But now the KDU has started this, and of course the students who have now enrolled for this program, the students who are hoping to enroll for this program, and of course the student population in general in Sri Lanka are looking to what your policies are on education, because the blurred lines here at least is the fact that the JVP, which is the largest section of the NPP, has for the longest time been staunchly against private education institutions, and have been a strong advocate for government-centric education. But unfortunately, the reality in Sri Lanka is that government-centric education, some students who even win their way into government universities don't want to follow that, because it's just full of delays, full of protests, and at times, and of course I think the university rankings will speak for itself, it's not on par with international standards. So what really is the policy of the NPP when it comes to private education? Is it no private education, or is it, we are pro-private education? Is it somewhere in the middle? Where is it?
So we are talking about higher education here, specifically, yes. Right? With regard,
I don't think there's really an issue as far as preliminary.
There are lots of issues.
Okay, but I think
let's
when it comes to education, it more or less would be in line with your education policy for higher education, or is there like drastically different?
No,
let's start off with higher education.
We'll start off with higher education, but keeping in mind that actually the bigger problem lies in our general education system, right?
Okay.
I mean, that's from
in real preliminaries crisis. To the secondary.
From early childhood education to primary, that's in real crisis.
Okay.
But let's talk about higher education to start with. The NPP policy is that a government has to be responsible for education, right? And that the government has the responsibility and the duty to provide education for all, irrespective of any socio-economic division.
Free of charge.
Free of charge. That is our policy.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
However, we are in a situation where over many decades, higher education has been willfully neglected by governments, right? Through underfunding, lack of resources, development of human resources, through politicization, through bureaucratic inefficiencies being allowed to fester within the system, right? So willfully our higher education system has been gradually weakened and brought to a point of crisis, right? So one of the biggest issues is that we are not able to cater for the demand, right? There's a growing demand for higher education, but as I said, this is willful, okay? Willfully our state system has been constrained, right, and allowed to weaken. So as a result, naturally, students have to look for alternatives, right? This created then a private education sector, right? And that's the reality today. But the private education sector today, as it exists, is not regulated. Right?
Not regulated at all?
Not regulated at all.
There is the University Grants Commission that registers, vets to a certain degree?
No. The private education sector can come under many forms, right? So they have collaborations with foreign universities which don't necessarily come under the purview of the University Grants Commission, right? They can set up all kinds of degree programs, all kinds of institutions. Sometimes the UGC may grant approval for a degree, a course, right? But then the institute starts offering many other courses which are not necessarily approved by the UGC, but will advertise themselves as saying UGC approved, because they've got one program that has been approved.
Okay.
Right? So there are many combinations because it's unregulated, it's market driven, right? So it's catering to a demand. It's catering to a demand, right? Then quality is not the top priority of any of these organizations because institutions, because there's a market, there's a demand, you're out to make money. So in our view, education is not something that you can just rely on profit as the only driver of how education is delivered, because it's a service.
Okay.
It's a service, and to maintain quality there have to be other considerations, right? And therefore we think the government has a significant role when it comes to regulating the private education industry and that whole sector. Okay. And that is something that we will do, right? We want to make sure that institution which claims to offer higher education, claims to be a university, whether it is state or non-state, meets certain standards, right? In terms of their recruitment, in terms of the quality of the courses they offer, in terms of the services they offer. It's not, it's not just like putting up a building and offering classes. Students have to have certain facilities. Students have to have welfare services. Students need to have access to good libraries. All of these things also have to be in place, right? So quality and regulating this sector, because it's in existence, whether we like it or not, right? So then our first priority will be expanding the state education.
So this is the order in which you will take action to reform the education sector.
In terms of priorities.
In terms of priorities.
Because all of this, we can't sort of do one and then finish one before we can get to the other. Okay. Because things are in such a mess, we have to address all of these things simultaneously. Priority will be strengthening and expanding the state education, higher education sector. Then next priority will be properly regulating the private higher education sector so that there's quality, that students know what they're going to get and they get what they expect. Right?
So speaking of just a tangent to one of the statements that you made, you said quality in the state sector education system. Now let's talk about the state education system for 1 second. We see massive protests on the side of the students. While some of them are justified, people may think some are justified, others may think they are not justified. Whatever said or done, the state education system is there to educate students, to provide them with education. So there is this notion among the general public that children who go to state universities not all state universities, but a large proportion thereof, don't really focus on their education because they get this for free, they don't have any value to it, they lose nothing out of it. So, they go on this whole, spree of protests. They continue to fail exams and be at the university because, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is no real limit on the number of years that you can really stay at a state university and get education, no matter how many times you fail the exam. So this notion is there amongst the general public. What would you have to say about that?
That's a perception. That's a notion. As you know, I came from the state taught in the state education, state university before I entered parliament. Right? This is a narrative. This is a perception that has been deliberately perpetuated, and I would challenge you to show me any evidence backing up what you're saying.
What about the convener of the Inter-University Students' Federation?
What about him? I mean,
isn't the same convener there for maybe even a few decades?
Not really. That's not true. To begin with, that's not true.
Okay.
Right? And to begin with, that's talking about one student, and there are.
No, I'm just saying the most prominent example.
Yeah, but that's hardly an example of an average university student.
What would you say is an average university student?
An average university student works really hard.
Okay.
Right? Has many challenges that they have faced first to get into the university, right? And then in a system which is increasingly placing lots of barriers for their advancement, and they're still sustaining. And despite all of these challenges, I still think that our state university system is delivering good graduates. By and large, there are exceptions. There are exceptions. Do not forget that we are still producing the healthcare workers for this country, right? And they're top class, right? I don't think anyone can challenge that. There may be deficiencies; they may not be perfect, but they're certainly doing a good job in sustaining this health system under difficult circumstances. We are producing good enough engineers who can get jobs anywhere in the world, right? In every sphere, in every area, we are producing good graduates. We don't talk about those things, right? Our public sector top people come from the state university system, right? So all this talk about massive protests, as if all the students everybody is just protesting on the roads. I mean, that's really not true even. It's not true. How often do you see everybody on the streets? I mean, when the Aragalaya happened, and the university students were a big part of the Aragalaya, middle class Karambo couldn't talk highly enough of the students. And they're like, oh, these boys and how wonderful and all of this, right? The minute middle class Karambo got it back into their comfort zone, then it's a problem, right? So, I mean, these are also perceptions. I'm not saying that there aren't problems in the university system, right? But the problems are not what you are pointing out. There are other problems, there are other serious problems which really need to be attended to. And what you're saying is not representative of the average university student, and certainly not of the vast majority of students that I taught in my 11 years in the state university system. Right? Most of those students work really hard. Right? Their families have put up with a lot to get their child to this position. Most of them finish their education in time and go out and start working. I worked in the Open University, where most of the students actually start working while they're studying. Right? They're already employed. We have very few unemployed graduates, right? Because most of them start working even while they are in university.
I think the same can be said about a lot of students who follow private education as well.
Yeah, right? So this idea that somehow the state university students are these entitled, spoilt brats, I mean, I think it's really insulting to describe them in that way. And if you actually take the trouble to understand what their lives are like. I have known students, right, who get their Mahapola and who send part of that Mahapola home to support their families, right? Because they come from such deprived.
And Mahaphola is just a couple.
It's just a couple of thousand, and often they don't even get it regularly, right? I know of students who are working to support their siblings while putting themselves through higher education. I know students right now who are going hungry because they can't even afford the subsidized meal at the cafeteria, right? So there are lots of issues that the students are facing, and still many of them are completing their studies successfully and coming out of the system with skills, right? So you can't sort of pinpoint one or two people or one association and say that is the experience of all students. That's not, right? And you can't say that our universities are not functioning, because we wouldn't be able to function as a country if our universities were such disasters. You talked about our low rankings. I completely agree. But what have governments done to actually invest in education, to invest in research and development so that they can move up those rankings? What has the UGC done in order to make it easy for international collaborations to happen, so that we can engage in research, so that we can expand our postgraduate education? None of this has happened, right? So there's a lot to be fixed in the university system, in the higher education system. And also, don't forget, we tend to think only about the 16 universities, but there's a whole other higher education sector, vocational training, professional education, all of that. That's actually a much bigger part of the higher education sector, right? And that needs as much attention, because that's in our policy, how we see it, there are certain disciplines, and there should be a very strong sort of professional and vocational higher education sector that's directly linked to training people for the job market, right? And that should be the bigger proportion of higher education. And the universities should be centers of research, development, innovation, new knowledge, right? So that there are two sort of, as it were, two tracks in higher education. What we're trying to do is, right now we've got mixed up everything, as we have in every other sector, I might add. But in education, this is having a particularly bad impact on our human resource development, right? Because without that good, strong human resource development plan, and a big part of that is our education system, without investing in that, we can't reach the goals that we want to, right? So first of all, no, I do not accept your description of higher education and of our university system. I would strongly object to that.
I did not mean that. I said there was a perception.
Yes.
was my
agree,
statement.
I know I am. And I strongly object to that perception.
Very
right?
well.
I mean, I grant you there are problems. I'm not sweeping the problems under the carpet by any means, right? But it's not a problem just about the students, and it's not a problem about entitled students who don't understand the value of what they're getting. That's not the story, and that's really unfair on them. That's really unfair on a vast majority of the university population.
What I believe is the general notion, or the fear, at least maybe perpetuated by your opponents, for whatever reason, for whatever way. The general public are of this opinion that, once the JVP or the NPP in this matter does come into power following the presidential election, they would remove the possibility for students to pay for their education and completely base the education system on competitive learning. For example, if I want to become an engineer, no matter what, and I can't really compete with the rest of the students in the country and, be among the top 10 or the top 100 in the country to, get into Morotu or whatever university. And if I am blessed with parents who can support me financially, that I will be deprived of the opportunity to follow a foreign course, because it doesn't, just because 100 students are selected for a program through this competitive examination system that we have, does not mean that only 100 of them can pass that program. Maybe the person who comes at 100,000th position, once they come into the university and get acquainted with the practicality, would be able to pass the program.
Shalan, in no country in the world are there universities or higher education systems without minimum qualifications or minimum entrance.
Okay.
Right? It's competitive everywhere.
Okay.
Not everyone who wants to become an engineer can become an engineer. Not everyone who wants to become a doctor can become a doctor.
Okay.
There are minimum entry requirements everywhere in the world. Right? What we want to do is to expand those opportunities. In Sri Lanka, they're far too restrictive.
Yes.
We agree, right? So that has to be expanded.
Even if a student maybe gets 3 A's, he's not guaranteed a spot, depending on the Z score.
Yes, right. But that's an exception. I think
Exactly.
the bigger problem is are the students who not the ones who get 3 A's, but the ones who get
The ones who pass.
ones who get average results, meet the entry qualifications and still can't get in, right? So expanding the higher education system is a priority for us. As I said, our emphasis will be on strengthening the higher education sector while we regulate the private education sector, private higher education sector, right?
But does that mean it's no game for the private education sector?
What do you mean no game?
So private education is a no.
No, if they're willing to be regulated, they can function, right? So we are not going to deprive you of the choice. If you we will set up a good state education sector. We will expand opportunities in the state education sector. If you still want to pay and go into a private institution, that's your right. We are not going to block you. If you want to go abroad for your education, that's also your right. We are not going to block that. But our priority will be to make sure that you also have a chance at a good public education, right? But we are not going to block your choice. If you still want to pay for your education and learn or go abroad, that's your right. That's your choice.
Well, what about,
right?
There has been talk about allowing foreign students also to come to Sri Lanka and follow courses.
Yeah, if our universities are good enough to attract, and that's what we want, right? So the thing is not to put the cart before the horse. Am I getting my metaphor right? Yes. Right? So you have to make sure if our universities are good enough, right? If our universities are good enough for our local students, then they're good enough for foreign students. I mean, you will attract foreign students if you have top quality universities. Right? So our aim is not to set up a university with the intention of attracting foreign students, because we will not consider this as a sector for the government to make money, right? Our intention is to set up top quality higher education institutes, including universities. Foreign students can then, of course they can come in, like in any other part of the world, right? So that's the goal. So the difference, I would say, is that we do not see the education sector as a sector for making money, right? It is a service. It is a sector that is absolutely essential for the development of human resources and has to be given that priority, and has to be treated with that in mind, right? If as a outcome of improving our quality, we are also able to attract higher foreign students where we get other opportunities, so be it. I mean, that's wonderful. That will be great. I mean, the higher we go in the rankings, the more recognition we get, more people want to come into the universities. It's brilliant. But that's a way away. There's a huge basic problem that needs to be fixed. Without fixing that problem, we can't talk about attracting foreign students.
But what will happen to students who are opting now to, go through private education?
They will be guaranteed that their education will be recognized and regulated, because at the moment they don't know what they're paying for, whether that is something that is recognized, whether that is supervised, whether that's monitored. They don't know that. They're taking a huge chance.
So the last time students enrolled with SITEM, they had to go through an entire legal battle,
there's
all of
a
that.
distinction to be made here with private medical colleges, right? Because that's not just something that is decided by the UGC. There are standards that are set for entrance qualifications, all of that, by their professional body as well, the Sri Lanka Medical Council, for example. So even the state universities, in order to be recognized, have to meet certain standards, right? Then along with that, there's clinical training, and it's clinical training doesn't mean that you can go to just any hospital and be trained. The hospital also has to have certain standards and facilities and professorial units and all of these challenges, right? So then unless you have developed that also, you can't just set up a university, right? Also think about this, right? I mean, you also have to think of from the patient's point of view, no? Right? Say you open up the Homagama base hospital for clinical training. If you don't have enough patients, right, then that's going to be a problem, A. Also, you don't want the patients harassed by having, 50 students examining you simply because there aren't enough students, patients, right? So all of these things are necessary, right, and have to be thought through and planned. Then we also need to know what we are going to do with the medical students who graduate. The country has certain requirements, right?
But I think with the economic crisis and the massive exodus of doctors and other professionals.
True, but that takes years again to build.
Understood.
Right?
Dr. Harini, I believe we're quite overdue for a commercial break. We'll cross over and be right back. Stay with News First. You're watching Face to Face.
News First, Face to Face with Shalan Benedict.
කොඩමිසලා කියලා ඉන්නකෝ එයා ඔය පිනෝකියෝගේ වයිෆ්ට ඇඳගෙන කොහෙද යන්න හදන්නේ කියලා.
කැන්වසින් යන්න මැට්ටෝ.
ෂා. මරුනේ.
ඇයි ළමයෝ? නෑන්ටි ඒගොල්ලෝ එයි. මේ අතුලේ පෝරනවා වගේ.
මගේ මේ ප්‍රශ්නේ මට තනියම විසඳ ගන්න පුළුවන් වෙයි කියලා මම හිතනවා නිරුවා. ඒ හින්දා අපේ පරිස්සමට මෙහෙට කවුරුත් එවන්න නිර්වාණ කරදර වෙන්න ඕනේ.
කියා දෙන්න ආදරේ තරම් අද රාත්‍රියට ඉදිහට
සිරස ටෙලිතිරයෙන්. News First, Face to Face with Shalan Benedict.
Welcome back. You're watching Face to Face. We're in discussion with Dr. Harini Amarasuriya, parliamentarian from the National People's Power Movement. Dr. Harini, we discussed in length, of course, about the education system in Sri Lanka, but even after such a long discussion, we were only able to cover just a small section of the higher education system reforms that Sri Lanka needs. And of course, whatever the plans that the NPP is having and the assessment of the NPP for the higher education system here in Sri Lanka. But I'd like to draw your attention to, the greater issues that Sri Lanka is facing as far as the economy is concerned. Let's start off with the statement made by former President Mahinda Rajapaksa, I believe, at the May Day rally. He said that it's better to allow us, meaning those who have been in power, to correct our mistakes and lead the country than allow people who have done bigger mistakes than us take over the country. How would you respond to this?
Right. How old is Mr. Rajapaksa? Mahinda Rajapaksa? Close upon
75 north?
75 north, right? Older, I think. Anyway, I would think that he has had enough time to learn from his mistakes and correct his mistakes, because he has been in parliament a considerable number of those 77 years, right? And I think the people have given him enough chances. And where have we got to? That's the question that people are asking, right? So it's not as if he has not been given a chance to correct himself. I think the whole, when they were defeated in 2015, that was the same story. They said, no, give us a chance to correct our mistakes. Did they correct their mistakes? No, right? In fact, they repeated those mistakes with even... Sorry?
They compounded on them.
They compounded on them, right? So I think this has to stop. I think, people in this country are no longer willing to buy this. Give us another chance to correct our mistakes. We are truly sorry, right? Because people in this country have given these leaders plenty of chances. I can't think of any other country that has been so patient with their leaders as much as we have, right? So, people are looking for something new. People are looking for something different. I think primarily people are looking for a different political culture, Shalan, where leaders don't feel so entitled. Leaders don't feel so privileged and take those privileges for granted, right? And don't think of themselves as above and beyond the law, right? They want leaders who are grounded. They want leaders that they can relate to, that they can communicate with, and who they feel are truly accountable to them, right? And I don't think that generation of leaders that Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa represents, and those leaders that came out of that political culture and system, understand this. Understand the need for a different way of doing politics, of a different style, different leadership style, right? And that is where they're so out of sync with the way the average citizen of this country is thinking, right? So his very speech shows to me the extent to which they're not understanding how much Sri Lanka has changed, how much the citizen has changed, and they're not even understanding what the citizen wants anymore. So do we really need leaders like that anymore? Do we need to really give them any more chances? I don't think so. I really don't think so. It's time for a new beginning.
Well, the argument that they themselves propound, which is kind of ironic to a certain degree, is the fact that, well, you saw what happened in 2019 when you wanted a change. You wanted, a non-political person to run the country, and look where that has led to us. I mean, and these are coming out of the same individuals, mostly from Viatmaga and those sort of other organizations that really clamped up and boosted the image of former President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. They themselves are saying, look here, you all tried this once. It really didn't work out for you. It turned out to be extremely bad. So don't try it again, Give it to us. We know how to do things. Let us do things.
My gosh, I didn't hear that, but I'm appalled, right? Because, I mean, I don't know. I don't think anyone is planning to bring Gotabaya into power again, or any Rajapaksa for that matter. So I think that's out of the picture altogether, right? What the NPP represents is a new, I can only speak for the NPP. What the NPP represents is a new political culture, a new leadership, and a leader who hasn't just come out of nowhere. I mean, this our presidential candidate, Andra Kumara Dissanayake, has been in politics, has gained experience, has worked from a grassroots level worker to a member of parliament, had a stint in as a minister, as a cabinet minister. And he has had years of experience in politics. I mean, he's educated, he's intelligent, right? And he's worked with the people. So he's proven himself, right? And we are offering that as a choice to people. We are not sort of suddenly, we have not constructed some person and said, here's the person who's going to rescue you from all your ills, right? They've had plenty of opportunities to see him in action. They have plenty of opportunities to question him, talk to him, meet him. The media has certainly done that, right? He's accessible. He's someone who's been tested and questioned, right? So I don't know who they're referring to when they say don't try that again, because I don't see a Gotabaya Rajapaksa candidate anywhere, right? And I mean, the gall of it, they are the ones who created this phony, right? And foisted him on the people of this country, and now to warn people not to do that again. I mean, do they think that people are fools? I mean, I think they do, right? I think they do. That's the level of disrespect they have for the people of this country. But I think they are utterly mistaken. They're utterly mistaken if they think that people are going to buy this kind of rhetoric. I think they are utterly mistaken. Shalan, the Rajapaksa project is over. That political culture that they tried to bring in is over. But I want to say this, it is not only the Rajapaksas who perpetuated that culture, who maintained that culture. I mean, perhaps they were the most sort of obvious version of it, right? But there have been there have been more subtle thank you, more subtle versions of it also. And I think people need to recognize that as well, right? And I think people are beginning to recognize that, right? Evil can come in many guises, right? And someone who looks very angelic may not be that, right? So I think we have to go beyond the sort of superficial aspects of it and really go into not also focus on the individual so much as look at the movement through which that individual is being is coming from, to look at the team, to look at the people who are working with him or her, right? All of these factors are important. So I would be highly suspicious of any candidate who claims to be the one who's going to fix it all, right? Who puts single-handedly, because they're somehow equipped with every possible skill and they know everything. I would be highly suspicious and highly cautious about those kinds of candidates, right? I think we need to look for a person who's a team worker, who's got a team of people who are behind that leader, who trust in that person and who has a good relationship with the rest of the team and who's proven himself or herself. I think in our case it's a him. So it's himself to be able to lead a team of people, right? And is respectful of that collective, the collective energy and the collective expertise that a group is bringing to the table.
Well, Sri Lankans, especially in the recent past, have seen many promises being given. The world, the sun and the moon has been promised to the people in Sri Lanka. But once that political party or individual comes into power, the story after that is very different. And Sri Lankan people have time and time again showed that as much as they gave the leaders of our country a huge leash back in the day, much leeway, they'd probably give them 2 terms before they really decide, okay, this is not working, these people are lying to us. Now that period has started to get shorter, starting with President Maithripala Sirisena. He came, he promised deliver certain things. Those things really didn't come through. The Easter Sunday attack came. Then President Gotabaya Rajapaksa came into power. President Maithripala Sirisena got 5 years. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa didn't get even that long. So chances are, and also for countries that are in economic crisis, you can see a pattern amongst the other countries in the world where many leaders come and go. So it's important that Sri Lankans get this right. And for the NPP in this matter, if the NPP is to bring Sri Lanka out of this economic crisis, it's important that the many factions, as you quite rightly said, within the NPPE, with the JVP, of course, as the larger faction, are in agreement on what should be done in this country. So is that really the case? Because your opponents think otherwise, and some of the examples, if I may, that they try to they bring out to propound this argument or to support their argument is the fact that staunch JVPers, long-standing JVPers, senior JVPers like K.D. Lal Kanta have sometimes a little bit extreme views on how the state should get involved in certain matters like energy generation, whatever that may be, and that you are representative of the more moderate, the more progressive side of the NPP, and that an individual like yourself, who's more moderate, more progressive, don't really agree with the stance of the long-standing JVPers, the senior JVPers. I only mentioned one name, but there are many more.
Shalan, I think what is happening is that our opponents are doing, because they can't attack us politically, right, have come up, in my view, with about 2 or 3 tactics. One is to paint us as some scary red commies, right? And some version of communism that I don't understand, as far as I know, never existed in this world, right? So that's one thing, right? Then the other thing is to say that we don't have a plan, right? The other thing is to precisely what you're saying now. There's some major division and factions within the NPP. That's their reality, not ours, right? When we decide on something, it's something that we collectively discuss and agree and stand by that agreement, right? So even this sort of construction of, say, the person that you maintained as Lanka as radical and Harini as the moderate progressive face, it's nonsense. I can think of many issues where I'm far more radical than Lanka. Right? Where he is much more moderate than I am. Right? So, I mean, this is a false dichotomy. There are issues. We are together as a party, as the NPP, because we have large areas of common agreement. Right? And whatever decisions we make, we have discussed and collectively come to those decisions. Right? The way we articulate it, it may be different. Our personalities are different, and that's okay. That's okay, right? I mean, we don't want everyone in our party to be like carbon copies of each other, right? The way we talk, the way our interests, our emphasis, right? All of this is different. That's what makes our party so rich and vibrant, that diversity, right? But when it comes to the fundamentals, when it comes to the principles, there we are in complete agreement with each other. So there, to me, there is absolutely this. Oh, there's like some JVP faction and an NPP faction fighting within the party. That's nonsense. I mean, I think our opponents would love that to be so, because their internal, they're sort of falling apart. And have so many factions that you're not sure where they will be, within 24 hours. But that's not how it is in the NPP. That's not how it is, right? We meet regularly, we discuss regularly, whatever we put out in public, we stand by for each other, right? Because it's something that we agree upon, right? So these are tactics, because they can't. This is the only way. The entire campaign of our opponents seem to be based on fear mongering. That's the path they've chosen. It's a really negative path they've chosen, because they're not choosing to talk about themselves, they're talking about us, right? And to me, that's a really insecure, defeatist campaign strategy. That's what they've chosen, We can't do anything about it.
Well, of course, in a few months, the general public will get an opportunity to decide who they want to rule Sri Lanka, who they want to bring Sri Lanka out of this economic crisis, and who they will choose not only for themselves, of course, but for generations to come in Sri Lanka, and they will decide on the fate of this beautiful country. Thank you very much, Dr. Harini Amarasuriya, for joining us this evening on Face to Face. Thank you very much to all our viewers out there for tuning in to another program of Face to Face. Of course, it's our responsibility to keep you informed about what's happening in Sri Lanka's political arena, and it's your responsibility to make an informed decision on who you vote for. Thank you for tuning in. Take care, and God bless.